In October of 2024, I started my big ex-vegan study. The study consisted of 2 blocks. One was ex-vegan survey, and the second block was ex-vegan interviews. The interview is already posted on my channel in the playlist. You will see the link in the description and here. As a former vegan myself, I was really interested to see if my experiences can be associated with some universal experiences, with some big statistics, because there are no good studies of ex-vegans out there. And so I wanted to summarize those experiences and possibly determine if the type of vegan diet really matters, or it is only the exclusion of the animal products that leads to all of those detrimental, extremely destructive health consequences when people adhere to a vegan diet to some extended periods of time. Because, I'm a public figure, so when I quit veganism, people came to my comments to inform me that I, of course, did the vegan diet wrong. But we all know that people who are currently vegans, they are doing vegan diet right. People who quit veganism, they did vegan diet wrong. So there is no other choice. Basically, what I wanted to see if, again, people following different vegan diets would have the same health outcomes. Another big part of the survey actually had information on how veganism affected lives of humans in any other ways. I also wanted to see not just the qualitative label of what type of diet they were consuming. I wanted to see what specific food items people ate on a daily basis at every stage of veganism. I broke down vegan experiences to early veganism, midterm veganism, and stage veganism, such that we can trace the individual progression of vegan experiences for every person, irrespective of the duration of their veganism, because everybody has different resilience to long-term malnutrition. And vegan diet is malnourishing, for sure. I have a vegan deficiencies playlist that you can check out. And actually correlating the observations from real-life examples with my theoretical findings that I introduced in the vegan deficiencies playlist was another very curious objective of my study here. So in summary, in the survey study that we're going to go through in this video, you're going to see the basic demographic data of the participants, their age, their sex, and their ethnicity. We're going to look at their diet history. What diet they followed before they became vegan? What diets were they following as vegans? And what diets they switched to after they've quit veganism? We're going to look at the nutrition quality assessment. Where are participants tracking their nutrition? Before veganism, at all of the stages of veganism, and after veganism, and whether they were nominally hitting their nutritional goals. What was the average caloric intake per day? Then we will look at such an interesting thing as perceived diet quality assessment. What our participants thought and felt about the food that they were eating in terms of taste, texture, satiety, desirability, how food was influencing their well-being in the short term, what food effects they were experiencing. Funny thing here is that when I was raw vegan, I made videos, I made live streams, and I remember a couple of people were writing to me that they couldn't find out why they wanted to almost die after they ate salads. And they were like, can you tell me please, why is this happening? So this is something that I remembered when I was processing that data. I also wanted to look into diet and lifestyle relationship, how veganism influenced other areas of human life, because our life is very complex. We have a lot of areas that deserve our attention, that we manage on a daily basis. That's what I wanted to study as well. Then another interesting chapter that we will look into is experience of quitting veganism. What psychological moments people went through when they were contemplating quitting veganism. How long were they thinking about quitting veganism before they actually took an action? What were the first foods that they were consuming after quitting? How their body responded to that, how their psyche responded to that. We will look into that as well. We will also study nutritional deficiencies, diagnosed nutritional deficiencies that our participants had, and what supplements they were taking, and how supplementation habits progressed as their veganism was progressing. Then we will look into actual health, symptoms, and conditions. I delineated the two because you can have a symptom, for example, some excessive hair loss. Will you go to the doctor with an excessive hair loss? No, many people won't. Symptoms and conditions are a different thing, even though the symptoms are still important to take into account to possibly correct your lifestyle sometimes. Sometimes they are a facet of some diagnosed condition that has a set of symptoms that define it. So we will be looking into health symptoms and conditions that our participants had. I also asked my participants to write down what influenced their decisions to go vegan, what were the outlets they used to inform their decisions to be vegan, how to shape their diet, and also I asked them to write down the outlets that helped them to snap out of veganism and determine their lifestyle direction afterwards. This information will be in a separate video. I also designed a very long food list that comprised over 470 food items for people to choose how much of each food and how frequently they were consuming before they went vegan, as early vegans, midterm vegans, and end-stage vegans, and after veganism. This is gonna be a very interesting one. I also tried to summarize people's entries to design a diet, some like median diet that people were following amidst their veganism, so it will be an interesting thing. On top of that, I also suggested a list of wellness practices and not so much nutritional supplements, I guess. Some of them are nutritional because some herbs, they contain some nutrients or whatnot, but basically it's a list of adaptogens. Like there is all this shamanism that people do by the end stage veganism, so I introduced that as a separate list because they're not strictly nutritional supplements. In total, we will look at 80 supplements and wellness procedures there. And the last question that people were asked to respond was their reasons for going vegan. So we will see what motivated the decision of people to choose this lifestyle for them. And then before we start looking into the presentation and going through the data, analyzing the data, I would like to thank every participant of this study. Everyone who filled out the survey and everyone who participated in the interviews. You did such a huge job, and I was so impressed with your kindness, with your dedication, with your commitment, with your discipline. You made this project possible. I am so beyond grateful for your contributions because it was a vast work. It was a huge amount of work, and everyone who's watching this video will realize why. As I mentioned, the survey had over 4,000 entries. So it was a huge thing to fill out, to think about, and I am so happy, guys, that you made it possible. I'm so grateful. I was really, really emotional when people who volunteered to participate in the study started giving me some feedback, started filling out the surveys. It was amazing. It was revolutionary. It was existential, really, to witness that. So I am super happy. I am super grateful for every one of you. And now I'm going to move to my desk and I'm going to start presenting you the data. And for people who are watching this video, please like it, please subscribe to my channel, and let's start with the introduction and the overview of this study. Ex-Vegan Study Report, March 2025. We will start by stating the big picture objective again. We want to determine whether elimination of animal products from the diet is the only culprit causing people to suffer negative health consequences of veganism, as described in the Vegan Deficiencies playlist, or if there is a sustainable, not wrong vegan diet. The research directions that I followed in the study were: collect the data on various scenarios of vegan experiences. Determine which types of vegan diets ex-vegans followed. Determine the duration of veganism. Determine the health symptoms people reversed and developed on various vegan diets. Determine how people's overall quality of life was influenced by veganism. Establish the progression of health issues induced by veganism. Establish whether those health issues were reversible. Correlate those health outcomes with the commonplace vegan nutritional deficiency outcomes. Determine the particular dietary patterns of ex-vegans through food diary. Study how supplementation patterns related to health outcomes. Study non-nutritional wellness practices people opted for, and determine why people became vegan and why they quit veganism. The research method that I used is survey. For the sample set, I invited people through different outlets. The survey participants were gathered through ex-vegan subreddit, through Raw Form of Life YouTube channel, and through Vegan Deterioration YouTube channel. The eligibility criteria for participation were being 21 and older, having a considerable vegan experience in the past, and being an ex-vegan. 70 people signed up to participate in the study, and 24 people completed the survey. The final sample set consisted of 24 people. These human diagrams are showing the visual of what 24 people are. 11 survey participants volunteered to be interviewed. The interviews are already posted on Raw Form of Life YouTube channel in the Ex-Vegan Interviews playlist. Participation in the Ex-Vegan study was voluntary. I, the author, did not participate in the survey study, but I will be giving some commentary on the things and observations that I can relate to. Then the important thing that I would like to discuss here is conflict of interest and incentives. I personally did not receive any funding from any nonprofit organization, business, or institution to conduct the study. Participation in the survey and in the interview project was voluntary, and participants were not financially rewarded or compensated. If you're curious, then why did people want to participate in the study? Those who actually gave me interviews, they talked about their incentives to participate in the study in their interviews. It was the first question that I asked everybody. Now let's discuss my personal motivation to conduct this study. I divided into two things: inward motivation and outward motivation. My inward motivation, something that serves my ego, something that serves my personal interests, is to satisfy scientific curiosity regarding my own vegan experiences. How do my experiences compare with the experiences of others? Then the second thing was to observe if my theoretical studies of veganism are supported by real life examples. That vegan deficiencies playlist. Then the third one was to enjoy communication with people. And then number 4 was to create original, interesting pieces of content. The outward motivation factors were to create a platform for ex-vegan people to tell their stories, to be heard and respected. Because one of the patterns that I noticed when I was talking to people was that they felt abandoned, they felt not heard, they felt gaslit when they quit veganism. They became invisible, their voice became worthless when they quit, when they tried sharing their experiences. Then the second objective here was to create a space where current vegans who consider quitting could find detailed information about ex-vegan experiences and validate their own experiences through those materials. Then the third facet of my outward motivation was to fill in the gap in the vegan and ex-vegan studies. I designed this survey in the following way. I collected the demographic data, and then I wanted to look at the diet history of the people. Then I conducted nutrition quality assessment, perceived diet quality assessment, diet and lifestyle relationship, experience of quitting veganism, nutritional supplements and deficiencies, health symptoms and conditions, vegan and ex-vegan outreach. This will not be included in the current video. Then exact food lists and wellness procedures and reasons for going vegan. I think this set of parameters creates a more or less complete picture of vegan and ex-vegan experiences, and this is why I find this study so unique. We will start by looking at demographic data. On this diagram, you can see the current age of participants. I plotted them as age range, so people from in their 20s make up a third of the participants, then people in their 30s make up 42% of the participants, and then 12.5% participants are from in their 40s, and 16.7% of participants are in their 50s. From the total number of participants, you can derive that we're dealing with quarter human statistics here, so those numbers kind of funny, but again, percentages are still a useful metric to utilize here. Then I collected the data on ethnicity of participants, so 70% of our participants were white. The smaller fraction was of the unknown ethnicity. One person was of Arab origin, then one participant was South Asian, then two participants were mixed Asian ethnicity, and then two participants were of African Caribbean origin. And then if we look at the biological sex of the participants, it's kind of in line with overall vegan trends, which is veganism is dominated by females. So female participants make up 87% and male make up 13% of our participants. We're moving on to the diet history. First, I looked at the age of becoming vegan. We see that teenagers and young adults from 14 to 21 years of age make up the majority of our participants. So majority of the participants became vegan before they formally became adults. So 41% of our participants were underage when they became vegan. Then the next dominating group was from 22 to 29 years of age, making up 36.4% of participants. And then people who were older than that, they were distributed in this following way. But what we can derive from this plot is that teenagers and young adults were most likely to become vegan. The next parameter that I looked into was duration of veganism. And what we can see is that most survey participants were vegan for over 5 years. People who were short term vegans in this study, and this is the group where I would belong, only a few participants were actually short term vegans here. There was one person that was vegan for 9 months and actually asked me if they were eligible for participation in the study, and I allowed them to participate because they already saw the effects of veganism by that point, like multiple effects of veganism. A few participants were vegan for 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and I would be in the category of 3 to 5 because I was vegan for 3.5 years. So I would belong to this group. But we see that the majority of the participants, 32% of participants, were vegan for 7 to 10 years. And we even have some super long term vegans with over 10 years of experience that make up 18% of our participants. And then we have a group that was vegan for 5 to 7 years, also making up close to a third of our participants. The interesting metric that I derived from these two plots was that there is actually some correlation between duration of veganism and the age of becoming vegan. I plotted duration of veganism versus age of becoming vegan. And what I noticed is that there is a maximum, there is a cutoff age, maximum duration of veganism that decreases linearly as the starting age under 30 increases. And then we see this scattered data here for duration of veganism in the age group older than 30. But this was an interesting observation here. Then, looking at diet history, I also tried to see what vegan diets our participants tried. And they could select multiple diets. Because, again, for very long term vegans, it probably would be expected that people experiment with different approaches. And I plotted percent participants and the array of very commonplace vegan diets. From this graph, we can see that the whole food vegan diet was the most popular among our participants. And then significant group of participants followed low-fat diets. I used different commonplace labeling such that people can identify themselves properly because for some people it's advertised as low-fat vegan diet. For some people it's like starch solution, so they would identify more with starch and sugar. But these two bars corresponding to low-fat vegan diets, they can be appended to each other technically because these diets are essentially the same thing. Then the second most popular diet was junk vegan diet. And we see that actually a considerable number of people also followed high raw vegan and raw vegan diets, fruitarian diets. Then you will see here the supplement-based bar. So some people follow this so-called supplement-based diet. What is that? Supplement-based diet I defined as a diet where you consume certain supplemental powders, certain synthetic mixtures that actually provide most of your nutrition, and then you eat just to fulfill your aesthetical preferences, the habit of eating food. Because there are instances where people literally, like Patrick Babunan, he actually eats supplements and then he supplements with food, with dietary items, because 3 meals of his consist largely of synthetic supplements. And this is what is meant here. Two people were for some period of time on a supplement-based diet. Then if we look at the diets that participants followed before and after vegan diet, we'll see some interesting trends here. Standard American vegetarian, food pyramid, pescatarian, omnivore, Mediterranean, national, lacto-vegetarian, other animal-based carnivore and keto diets prior to going vegan with blue bars, and after veganism. From this plot, we can derive that there is a surge of interest towards animal based diets after quitting veganism. And when we start analyzing the food list, when we start analyzing the health outcomes, we will notice that there is some curious trend that was observed among the participants of the study. What we see is that standard American and vegetarian diet, especially, were the leading diets that people adhered to prior to going vegan. People identify their diet differently. These labels are just a big picture labels. Again, this is why I separated this from the actual food lists, because the food list is where we actually will see the complete picture. Because how do we define standard American diet? National diets will be different as well, because we have different nationalities, different dietary patterns across the world. Then what is omnivore diet? It is for people to self-identify. With animal-based, carnivore, and keto, the situation is a little bit easier because animal-based, carnivore, we all know very big names that promote these diets, and we know a lot of influencers, we know the precise directions that these diets take. So with this in mind, again, it's much easier to derive what those diets represent exactly, or at least closely. Then, what I also studied in the diet history section was number of vegan diets that participants tried. 37.5% of participants adhere 37.5% of participants stuck with only one vegan diet throughout their veganism. Then 29% of participants were on two diets throughout their veganism. Then 21% were on three vegan diets. And this is pretty much the majority of the situations. And there were singular participants that followed 4, 5, and 6 vegan diets throughout their vegan stage. But most participants tried 1 to 3 types of vegan diets. Then I decided to see if it is one vegan diet, which one? And participants who followed only one vegan diet followed largely 56% of participants followed whole food vegan diet. Then the rest was split equally between junk vegan diet, starch and sugar based or low fat diet, then high raw whole food vegan diet, and some other diets, however they wanted to define them. However, among those who followed only one type of vegan diet, the majority chose whole food vegan diet. Then I wanted to see if there is a correlation between the number of vegan diets that people followed and duration of veganism. And here I made a graph, number of vegan diets versus duration of veganism in our participants, and I observed 3 modes here. And the first mode is for short-term vegans who were on a vegan diet for up to 3 years. And this is where we see our leader who tried 6 vegan diets. This is where we can see that veganism just did not work for them. They tried hard, I guess. Then we see that 2 people followed 3 vegan diets, and one person gave up after one type of experimentation. Then the second mode that we're observing here is for ultra long-term vegans who were on a vegan diet for over 10 years. These people on average followed only 2 vegan diets, which means that for those people perhaps following vegan diet was genetically more favorable than for other people. And then what we see here is that the number of dietary experiments linearly increases with the duration of veganism from 5 to 10 years. So what we can derive from this plot is that people who quit veganism early tend to experiment with vegan diets more and not successfully. Then the most lasting vegans tend to experiment with the diets less, and then we see this linear increase. The more years we're on, the more trial and error we're going through. Then I also asked my participants what vegan diets they enjoyed the most. They could select only one this time. And whole food vegan diet was a leader again, with 65% of respondents saying that it was their favorite type of vegan diet. Then the second place was occupied by the junk vegan diet, with 17.4% of participants preferring it over all other kinds. Then to my enjoyment, raw vegan diet and fruitarian diet were the third, and then some other diet that some person also followed. They did not specify which. So a whole food vegan diet so far has been the most followed, the most preferred, and for people who followed only one diet, it was the choice. And outside of junk vegan, varieties of a raw vegan diet were also favored. Here, we're concluding our diet history chapter and we're moving on. Nutrition quality assessment. The first parameter here is evolution of nutrition tracking habits. This diagram shows number of participants that tracked their nutrition. They tracked all of the nutrients, then only macros and micros, then only macros, that rarely tracked their nutrition and did not track their nutrition. Before veganism, as early vegans, midterm vegans, end stage vegans, and ex vegans. This type of diagram is something that you will see a lot throughout this study, where we show number of participants or percent participants and the stages of veganism. I did not put years like 1, 2, 3, 4 because we have a huge distribution of duration of veganism. And it was very interesting to somehow standardize the term of veganism into the representative stages, because what happens in early veganism will be different from what happens in midterm, and then the end stage veganism will be a totally unique experience that ultimately leads to people quitting veganism. This is why I worded it this way. And this represents our timeline basically for each participant individually. And what we see here is that becoming vegan actually made participants track their nutrition more meticulously or start tracking it altogether. We see that before veganism, the large fraction of people, 2/3 of people, were not tracking their nutrition whatsoever, and only a small fraction, a third, were tracking it rarely. While some people, some one person, was more nerdy and tracking macros and micros together. Then, when people switch to veganism, we see that they start being more attentive to macros. The fraction of people who start tracking macros and micros increases, and then there is actually a surge in number of people who tracked all the nutrients. All the nutrients meaning macros, micros, amino acids, individual amino acids, fatty acids, and so on, whatever it may be. Then we see that by midterm veganism, the situation relaxes a bit. So people start tracking their nutrition less, but only to resume tracking their nutrition more meticulously towards the end stage veganism. And then what we see is that the habit of tracking nutrition largely carries on to post veganism. So, some general trends that we can identify here is that becoming vegan made participants track their nutrition, and in depth nutrition tracking was more common among early vegans and end stage vegans. Then the participants were asked to respond whether they were nominally hitting their nutritional goals. And here again, the same structure of the plot, number of participants, before veganism, early vegan, midterm, end stage, and ex vegan. The options here were that they were, yes, nominally hitting their nutritional goals, that they were hitting their nutritional goals only sometimes, then quite rarely, and no, they were not nominally hitting their nutritional goals. What we see from this plot right away is that participants struggle to nominally hit their nutritional targets the most as end stage vegans. What we also see here, another big trend that is pretty striking, is that after quitting veganism, participants appear to be hitting their nutritional targets better than prior to going vegan. What changed? Dietary habits changed. People learn a lot about themselves, about the diets that work for them, by going through veganism, apparently. But what we see throughout veganism, we see that it was getting progressively harder for people to hit their nutritional goals. And this is an interesting plot because, again, this represents only the self assessment, the judgment that people had about their own diet. Was it growing awareness about their nutrition as opposed to them being able to eat certain types of foods? I think so. What you know here, what you know here, what you know here, and what you know here, and what you know here are totally different things. So your judgments will be different. Here you will see that there is an offset. One person did not respond to this question because they were not tracking nutrition and they decided to just ditch this question. So this is they were not tracking it before veganism. That's why you see this offset here. You will see them every now and then because there would be one person who would not respond to certain question, and that would lead to the offset in these bars. But in summary, we see that it's likely, I will speculate, and people actually participants of the study, please respond in the comments. If you have something to elaborate on regarding the data, if you want to describe your own experiences, if you have your own interpretation of this data, please pitch in the comments. What happened here, my speculation is that indeed it was people had growing awareness about their own nutrition. And this is why they realized they were not hitting their nutritional goals. Then the next question was, what was your average daily nominal caloric load? People were asked to put a number, a single number, how many calories per day they were consuming. Some people put ranges. I took the average of that range because I didn't want to clutter the table. So we also plotted them average daily calories at different stages of veganism. Before vegan, early, midterm, end stage, and ex-vegan. I also extracted the median values for each stage. And we see that the median average daily calories increase as the veganism progresses, reaching maximum towards the end stage of veganism, and then dropping slightly after quitting veganism. However, the distribution of numbers is pretty small. It represents the attempt of people to squeeze in more calories. If we look at this distribution, indeed, the average daily caloric intake increases for people. However, the absolute maximum was for some person was an early vegan stage, we see that the distribution of caloric load during veganism is broader here. Here we're concluding our nutrition quality assessment chapter and we're moving on to perceived diet quality assessment. How satisfied people were on different diets. And the first parameter that I wanted to study here was the taste of food at different stages. And the criteria here were the taste of food was excellent, pleasant, tolerable, pretty bad, and person needed to cope with it. I plotted percent of participants and our good old stages. And an interesting observation here is that people who felt that their food was tasting pretty bad happened in the before vegan phase, ex-vegan phase, and then end stage vegan. So actually among the early vegans and midterm vegans, there were no respondents who felt that their food was pretty bad or they needed to cope with it. However, we see the surge of responses that their food was tasting pretty bad to them and they needed to cope with it in the end stage veganism. For most people, their food was pleasant or tolerable throughout their vegan journey. And then we see that nowadays, as ex-vegans, people report very high degree of satisfaction with the taste of their food, with some small fraction of people feeling that it's pleasant, tolerable, or pretty bad. Another interesting observation here is that the food taste is more enjoyed post veganism than prior to veganism. This can be either a consequence of people experiencing what it can be, or just changing their diet to more proper, to more, I guess, high quality diet after being vegan and researching how they should really eat. But yeah, this is something that we can joke about that if you want to start enjoying your food, go vegan and then quit. The second parameter, second characteristic of food that I wanted to look at is texture of food. And also we had criteria appealing, nothing special, tolerable, and off-putting. Here we see that half of participants reported that the food texture towards the end stage veganism felt tolerable or off-putting. And the food texture is more intensely enjoyed post-veganism than prior to veganism. Same trend as we see with the taste of food. Important parameter here is satiety. Satiety was a very curious one because it tells us quite a lot and can explain why people opt for certain dietary patterns altogether and why some people actually develop EDs as vegans. What we see is that almost all participants started struggling to get satiated, which is purple. Purple color corresponds to that person was always hungry for more food. So most participants felt either kind of incomplete or always hungry for more food in the midterm and the end stage veganism. In the end stage veganism, we can safely say that for most participants, it was almost the constant hunger. Then the positive flip here is that the satiety score increased after quitting veganism compared to even prior to veganism. And it's drastically different from what people experienced in the end stage veganism. And if you watch my interviews, I had several respondents who said that they had uncontrollable surges of hunger towards the end stage veganism. One person was telling the story how she could not have a jar of nut butter at her home because she would just annihilate them. She could not resist consuming them. Another participant reported that he developed the most obscure food cravings in the end stage veganism. And when we hear all of the influencers that you need to drastically increase the amount of food you're consuming, people do increase the amount of food that they're consuming when they go vegan. And as they progressively become more and more vegan, if we can say that, but if they're as they're going through their vegan stages, the problem is that at some point, the amount of food becomes too much for you to stomach, but the amount of nutrition is not enough regardless because you're missing key nutrients in your diet. And this is why people experience this insatiable hunger because they are not providing the nutritional load that their body is expecting from food with any meal, with anything that they do. So, this insatiable hunger, as any craving, as any uncontrollable eating behavior, I speculate partially, yes, it can come from psychological issues, but it's largely driven by people having deficiencies. It can be mineral deficiencies, protein deficiencies, and so on. It can be fat deficiency. So, this is a very, very, very valuable piece of information that for over 75% of participants, it was 80% of participants, they were always hungry for more food in the end stage of veganism. Then I also asked them to identify whether their food was desirable to them. We see that almost 50% of participants reported that eating became a chore for them towards the end stage of veganism, which is purple color here. Food desirability increased post veganism compared to even prior to going vegan. But food desirability score actually improved as people became vegans. So early vegans reported one of the highest scores for craving their food. It is only towards the end stage veganism that eating became a chore for a large fraction of people. But early vegan and even midterm vegans reported higher desirability of food than prior to veganism. Then another important parameter here was pleasure per effort. Pleasure per effort shows overall satisfaction with food relatively to the amount of work and effort put into making it. Think about, for example, you buy a duck, like a whole duck. You rub it with spices, you stuff it with apples, you add some dry fruit, sprinkle it with some salt, and you put it in the oven. In the kitchen, you spend probably 15 minutes preparing this duck. The rest is done by the oven. If you want to make, let's say, vegan duck, vegan turkey, whatever it is, you need to go online, shop for several hours for different ingredients that you need to buy. You need to watch some tutorials for how to blend those things. You buy some powders, some synthetic additives, you buy some flavoring, you buy wooden bones, you buy, I don't know, whatever the shamanism, whatever arts and crafts that go into making that vegan turkey, let's say. Then you receive, several days later, you receive all those compounds by mail, or you go to different stores to purchase them separately because they're often not found at one place. Those things arrive. You start mixing them. Sometimes you need to marinate, cure certain things for several days before you can actually assemble them into something. You spend a day conditioning your ingredients. The next day, you need to assemble them. You need to actually create some figurine, some shape, and then you cook that thing. And that generates you the kind of experience of eating a turkey as a result. In which case will you receive more pleasure per effort? You'll receive much more pleasure per effort if you eat normal, real duck than as opposed to all the effort that you put into creating something that only remotely resembles, if you have bad memory, the real thing. So pleasure per effort here, there are only three characteristics here: high, okay, and low. And so 90% of ex-vegans report high pleasure per effort here, while only 10% of end-stage vegans describe it as high. We see also the descending trend in pleasure per effort with time of being vegan. It's pretty vivid. And again, we have the same thing going on. End-stage veganism with food, with eating becoming a chore, with desirability of food decreasing, we also see the trend in decreasing pleasure per effort. Then the next parameter that I wanted to study was conceptual pleasure. This parameter will also require definition. Conceptual pleasure represents how good and healthy you think the food you eat is. The example here, the illustration would be: you go to McDonald's, you get yourself French fries, burgers, some sauce, and soda. You may get an immense pleasure from eating this food, but when you know that this food is horrendous for your health. It's really harmful. So you are not receiving conceptual pleasure from eating this food because your concept, your knowledge about this food tells you that it's very bad for you. As opposed to you go to some, I don't know, smoothie bar or some salad bar and you get some fresh salad or smoothie made of fruits, berries, kale, and with some spirulina. You know that spirulina, kale, they're super healthy. So you receive a lot of conceptual pleasure because you believe that you are eating something extremely healthy. And in the context of vegan study, this parameter is actually super important. Let's look at this graph. So again, percent participants, stages of veganism. Green is high conceptual pleasure, orange is neutral, purple is low, and gray, I did not or I don't care about the conceptual pleasure. We can translate it as I did not or I don't care about the health qualities of my food. So prior to going vegan, we see that most people, they did not care about it, or they were neutral towards the qualities of their food. And what we see is that conceptual pleasure drastically increases as people go vegan, which tells us that most people understood that veganism is good for health. It shows us the conditioning that goes with veganism. In the very last chapter, we will look at the reasons why those people, the participants of this study, went vegan. You also can watch the interviews and hear it firsthand. But irrespective of the reasons for going vegan, we see that most people had very high conceptual pleasure. Some people were neutral towards it, and very few people, probably this slice represents just one person, had low conceptual pleasure. As we go towards end stage veganism, this adulation towards the health benefits of vegan diet starts decreasing. So people likely start tapping into the world of what exists outside of veganism. Maybe something is not working right. Or it also can be that people get tired of making their food from scratch. They go towards junk vegan diet. And this is why we may see the surge of neutral level of conceptual pleasure. What we observe is descending trend in conceptual pleasure with time of being vegan. And the highest score for conceptual pleasure was observed specifically in the early vegan stage. Ex-vegans reported higher levels of conceptual pleasure than prior to going vegan, which also shows that people do follow some diets that they mindfully selected, developed after being vegan. So they eat with purpose, kind of with health purpose right now, as compared to what was before. And this is another interesting metric here. But this to me tells that people realized that something was fishy about veganism and they had low conceptual pleasure. And they were likely habitual vegans for some time, either habitual vegans or just, again, contemplating the switching from veganism or experimenting with different things. We'll also look at the numbers related to that. And now let's look at a set of pretty interesting parameters here. So I requested from my participants to denote what immediate positive health effects they had from food, then also what immediate negative effects of food they experienced, then delayed positive effects and delayed negative effects. And let's go through each of those plots. Before vegan is gray, green is early vegan, pink is midterm vegan, blue is end stage vegan, and yellow is ex vegan. Yellow is outlined. So everything outside of veganism is outlined, and vegan is here in the middle. So I plotted percent participants and some of the positive effects of food that we can experience immediately after eating. Here we see pleasant fullness, good aftertaste, good mood, peace, gratification, calm energy, relaxation, and sense of lightness. These are some things that I consider to be positive about, like some aftermath, during the aftermath of us eating. What we see here is that overall, after quitting veganism, more participants reported having pleasant immediate effect after eating food than prior to going vegan or doing veganism, which is again in line with everything else that we've observed with their perception of texture, with their perception of taste, and so on and so forth. Then another thing that we see is that we see the decline in all those positive things as veganism progresses. Here, good mood, we see that people experienced good mood more frequently than prior to going vegan after they have switched to a vegan diet. Sense of lightness, also not surprising stat here when people just go vegan when they eliminate certain foods. And now imagine if you eat potatoes, let's say with roasted meat, and drink, I don't know, some soda alongside with it or something crazy like that. And then imagine if you eat the same potatoes but with a light salad with fresh vegetables, and then drink, like, let's say, green tea after that. What type of meal will leave you feel lighter? I bet that potatoes with a salad will likely feel quite a bit lighter than eating meat with copious amounts of animal protein and fat. So this is a not surprising thing, but we see that it drastically drops off as we go towards end stage veganism. So only 40% of people to begin with experience that. Yeah, in the end stage veganism, we see that only a few people still experienced any immediate positive effects of food. Here, peace is like very low. I mean, it's a weird thing to experience after eating, but I guess something I wanted to include. Then calm energy, we see it skyrockets after in terms of rate of occurrence, rate of incidence among the participants. Calm energy increases, relaxation, gratification, good mood, pleasant fullness. Pleasant fullness is something so true because very well suited diet that fully corresponds to your individual needs, that also contains high quality animal products, it does leave you feeling pleasantly full without feeling stuffed, without feeling heavy. So this is something. Then sense of lightness, here we see also that ex-vegans don't experience sense of lightness, which also, I mean, these are subjective things and we can interpret them differently. So possibly sense of lightness is in juxtaposition with pleasant fullness for many people. But I would say that personally for me, on my current diet, I experience both pleasant fullness and sense of lightness because I'm never stuffed, I'm never overeating. Let's move on to the immediate negative effects. So here's our emotional cue here. Immediate negative effects of food. Here, this plot is a little bit busy looking probably, so please take some time, pause this video, and look at this plot, explore it yourself. I wanted to summarize. So again, end stage vegan is blue, midterm vegan is pink. We see that immediate negative effects start skyrocketing towards the end stage veganism. What we see is that bloating, lethargy, and fatigue were the most prevalent immediate negative effects of eating food towards the end stage of veganism. And let's see what we have here. We have burping, unpleasant aftertaste, fatigue, lethargy, stomach distension, nervousness, anxiety, bloating, stomach heaviness, aversion from food, nausea, heartburn and reflux, mucus, mild allergy symptoms. I had one person that did an interview with me. She reported that she experienced towards the end stage veganism and she was a super long term vegan, she developed heartburn and reflux, and she found out that it was a consequence of excessive carbohydrate intake. And so when she cut down carbohydrates and replaced carb dominated foods with more wholesome animal products, she stopped having those symptoms that she struggled with for several years. Well, like without any successful ways of managing that condition naturally as a vegan. Then what we also see among the trends is that the rate of the immediate negative effects is the smallest after quitting veganism. So we barely see those effects emerging after quitting veganism. We see bloating here for some people, stomach heaviness, heartburn and reflux, mucus, unpleasant aftertaste, and burping. This is one person. These are two people, one person again. Other things do not seem to occur in our participants after quitting veganism. If we look at the pre-veganism, then we see that there were for some considerable number of participants, there were some negative effects of eating food immediately after eating. So these are quite interesting symptoms here. And are we surprised about any of them? Stomach distension, 40% of people experience that. Not surprising at all because midterm vegans, end stage vegans, they try to fit in more food. We saw that people increased their caloric intake. Also, yeah, there are some rules, right? So what we hear from recommendation, just increase the amount of food you're eating if you are feeling tired and so on. There is a thing that you're just under eating if you're on a vegan diet and you feel like something is off. Then what they also suggest is that you should eat greens. Like if you want to feel fuller, just eat greens. You're not eating enough greens, so just squeeze that salad in. So that leads to stomach distension naturally because it's high volume of useless food. And then lethargy. Lethargy was one of the frequently reported symptoms. Again, when I was raw vegan influencer, lethargy was something that people who struggled to be raw vegans, they brought up this issue a lot. Fatigue, lethargy, yeah, same thing, pretty much, almost. And then aversion from food, we see that emerged in about probably 15% of participants, aversion from food. This is also not surprising because, I mean, when you overeat foods that don't satisfy you biologically, your body will just naturally try to protect you from eating them, from eating that food. Anxiety is an interesting one. So, over 45% of people suffer from anxiety after eating. And this is very strange too. Please elaborate. If you experience this symptom, the participants of the survey, if you experience this symptom, please elaborate. Why was it so? Nervousness and anxiety, they seem to be quite interesting to be associated with food, and I understand where you're coming from. I need to sit and think about it. I need to focus. I need to remember my experiences to fully kind of try to imagine how it could be. Then burping, we see that the number of people suffering from burping after food increased when they started being vegan, stayed steady. And that stayed steady throughout veganism to 20%. This is an interesting one. Also, again, what can it be associated with? It can be ranging from the volume of food that you're consuming to the macros of food that you're consuming. Then let's move on to delayed effects of food. So this is also your emotional reference. Delayed, we're dealing with delayed positive effects of food. And so let's read what we have here. Steady energy, seamless digestion, comfortable elimination, restful sleep, good appetite, desire to be active, good libidos, no snacking, good mood, good focus, mental sharpness. These are the delayed positive effects of food because food affects us really, really strongly. Food determines our biochemistry. The spikes of insulin do so much in the body, for example, right? Or having high blood sugar for extended periods of time also do a lot in the body. Any deficiency or supplying certain things or being dehydrated, they all contribute quite a bit. Just being hungry, having like hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, then all of these things will also determine how we will feel. So if we look at this graph, just a brief assessment tells us that the most prevalent delayed positive effect of food is steady energy and is experienced after quitting veganism. Then, if we focus on the graph, the trend we see is that the ex-vegans are the happiest with the delayed effects of their food that they're eating, more happy than prior to going vegan actually, which also, yeah, we can thank the experience of veganism for bringing some better diet to our awareness and actually ultimately optimizing our lifestyle, because so far what we've seen was that ex-vegans seem to be the happiest. So the lessons that we learn, they lead to much better dietary choices, lifestyle organization, understanding of our body, understanding of food, values, understanding of food composition and what we need. This is a positive observation here. And what we see also is that the delayed positive effects of food, the rate of experiencing them among the participants, it drops towards the end stage veganism. And what we see is that restful sleep, a lot of people could not report that towards the end stage veganism. Only 30% of people had restful sleep as vegans, maximum, up to 30%. Then comfortable elimination, we see that 15% of people or so, or 12 probably, 12% of people experienced some problems with elimination, whatever it is. I didn't specify here because it doesn't matter. Either way would be not optimal. Then focus issues, mental sharpness, those are gone. Again, you cannot be an efficient intellectual if you are starving. Because again, brain is a very energy demanding organ, not just energy, but also nutrient demanding organ. It requires superior health. It requires you to not have any anemia. It requires you to have fatty acids and in general being pretty balanced person. Then another thing that we're seeing, no snacking. So the snacking thing, and we will see on the next slide, starts being a problem. Desire to snack starts being a problem here. Then seamless digestion. Only a few people had seamless digestion as end stage vegans. Here we see that only 50% of people can report it after quitting veganism. So this is also an interesting metric. People are still on optimization. Then steady energy. Nobody had that in the end stage veganism. No one. And the drop happened towards midterm veganism. And this is where, again, we see this snacking. And let's look now at the delayed negative effects of food. Also, somewhat maybe overwhelming plot, so pause the video and explore a little bit on your own in your own rhythm if you need a moment to just glance through. This guy reminds us in what domain we're currently existing. So, delayed negative effects of food. So, if we again, brief trends, participants experience the most delayed negative effects of food during the end stage of veganism. And let's go through the delayed effects that I listed here. So, feeling stuffed, energy drop, craving snacks, poor appetite, low libido, heartburn, nausea, diarrhea, constipation, body odor, acne, skin flare ups, migraine and headaches, poor sleep, brain fog. So, those are the delayed negative effects. And the most prevalent ones were energy drop and craving snacks. This is the signature of veganism, is that people start being obsessed with food. And energy drop and craving snacks, they go hand in hand because, I mean, where are you going to harvest energy after eating? For example, your body will be spending resources to digest all the food that you put in it. And the more of the empty foods you're consuming, the more resources your body will need to pull to process that food without you supplying it any substance that it actually requires. You keep eating more and more and more and more. You're not getting the nutrients that your body is asking to receive through food. So, digestion of food, processing of those nutrients, pulls the energy from your body. This is one mechanism probably that we can visualize, but also when you start having sugar imbalances, when you don't have a sustained energy release mechanism because you are eating a lot of food that is carbohydrate dominated, especially if you're on low fat diet, this is going to be a problem. Then, I mean, of course, people who are on low fat vegan diet, they can argue me in the comments. Please go ahead. I don't believe in this dietary system whatsoever. I don't believe in general in veganism, let alone in low fat veganism, even though, again, from my understanding of metabolism of vitamin D, for example, I would agree probably that for metabolizing fat soluble vitamins, if you're a good synthesizer of cholesterol, if you're a good synthesizer of the bile, then maybe it's more beneficial than consuming copious amounts of plant oils, certain plant oils that will inhibit absorption of cholesterol, that will inhibit absorption of vitamin D, also A, K, and E. So maybe there are some bonuses from low fat vegan diet, but I would not be doing that ever. I swear by fats. I've always been swearing by fats, including on my raw vegan diet and afterwards. But this energy and craving snacks is It's super bad. I mean, you are not supposed to be munching the entire time. As a Homo sapiens sapiens, you are not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be solving much more interesting problems in life than harvesting food every half an hour of your life. You are supposed to be building civilizations as a Homo sapiens sapiens, not munching. It is for primitive primates. This is the task for primitive primates to consume food the entire time, like to revolve the entire life around eating. I can tell you the difference, the grand difference when you are on a void, high volume diet as opposed to when you are on nutrient dense diet. You can live, you can pull off one meal a day easily if you are receiving everything, every nutrient that you need with a slow release. It's an amazing practice. Like I could easily go 1 or 2 meals a day on my current regimen. So it's easy to do without application of any willpower. As a raw vegan, there's always like something in the pantry, something in the fridge, some fruits on the shelf, and you constantly need to eat. First of all, you're not receiving any nutrients. So when you're aware of that, you try to design your diet in a way that you have some distributed food palette such that you can get the essential nutrients at least on paper. And second, you just consume snacks all the time as a vegan. This does huge disservice to primarily to the first of all to your hormonal system and also to your dental health. This is very bad. Very, very bad strategy for dental health because you're not capable of producing like some salivary nitrogen. You're not remineralizing your teeth ever. You're literally producing all conditions for total degradation of your dental enamel and also gums and stuff. Then feeling stuffed, we see that 40% of people on average towards the end stage veganism experience the feeling of being stuffed. I understand that fully as well because yeah, you start increasing the caloric intake to feel better, but because this is where some things start emerging, some health related things. And the first advice that you hear from everybody is to increase the amount of food you're eating. Your stomach is not a condom that can stretch to like cover the entire human if needed. Your stomach has very limited capacity and supposed to not be stretched such that it can properly expose all of the food matter to the digestive juices. Then poor appetite. We see that some people even experienced poor appetite as an end-stage vegan. This can be due to a variety of reasons, I guess. Write down why you experienced poor appetite as end-stage vegan. Then low libido. Low libido can be also, we see that it's actually the rate of it is pretty high. 55% of people experience low libido as end-stage vegans in relation with food. It can be, again, the delayed effect, yes, that you are not producing enough steroid hormones. Then another thing is you don't have energy. It's a very prolific thing. This is literally your body telling you that you're not supposed to reproduce in this state of your body. This is what it tells you, that you are not fit enough to reproduce. This is what this metric shows you. And you need energy for that because childbearing, like raising a child is a lot of energy. It requires a lot of health. If you're experiencing this, don't do this. It's a very prolific thing. And then also low libido is a sign that your life force is low. If we word it in this more metaphoric way, that means that you are severely physically and mentally depressed at this point. Then heartburn, also the rate increases, so 20% of people start experiencing heartburn towards the end stage veganism. Compared to the baseline, our baseline would be what, 7-8% here. And then the symptom decreased after quitting veganism. So only one person actually experiences that. So the rate among ex-vegans is the lowest, even compared to pre-veganism. Then nausea. Some people start experiencing nausea after eating is midterm and end stage. Then the elimination problems also started being a thing, prevailing both, by the way, diarrhea and constipation started being a thing towards end stage veganism. 30% of people experienced them equally. And then we see that constipation, of course, no, I mean, it's an intuitively clear, started being more of a problem towards after quitting veganism. I mean, it's less frequent than before veganism. So people did optimize something. So half of the people who experienced that beforehand they would optimize it after quitting veganism. This is something that deserves to be corrected and that needs to be corrected, I would say. So figure it out. Body odor. Here we see also, I put it here partially because I noticed that celery and spices create terrible smell from the body. I quit eating celery just because I hate the smell that it produces from my body. My body literally tries to eliminate, I guess, from every pore. That's why I barely eat any spices or any like celery because it just makes your body smell like celery and it's very bizarre. I can't stand that. So some people actually experience higher body odor. This can be I don't know. There could be various reasons to that because our body odor tells a lot about our vitality levels, about our metabolic health, basic bacterial balance, I guess. And also, yeah, what we are eliminating through our pores with our sweat. Whichever comes in excess, again, in the example of celery, we will be eliminating through our pores as well. Then acne. Acne started being more prevalent in the end stage veganism, and it's actually the rate of occurrence of acne is the highest in the end stage veganism. But prior to going vegan, it also was high, comparable with the end stage veganism. What we see is that less people start experiencing it after quitting veganism, and also interestingly, we see that people who were vegan, they did not have acne in the early and midterm veganism. And then there's a surge. Whoop, the rate tripled, I think, almost tripled towards end stage veganism. Why? Again, immunity could reduce, hormones could get wrecked, then just insulin resistance can happen. Then skin flare ups. These can be dermatitis, eczema. We see that also there's a surge of that towards end stage veganism. 20% of people experience that, and then non experienced after quitting veganism. Then migraine and headaches. Migraine and headaches steadily increase. Nobody experiences them as a consequence of eating food. And as ex vegans, pretty much, again, the context of eating food. Because migraine and headaches, I would experience them before going vegan, for example. I could eat, I could smell beans, okay? I can smell beans and rice and have a migraine if there is another compounding factor. If I didn't sleep well that day and I smelled beans and rice, that's a migraine. Let alone if I ate beans and rice. That is a total, like, migraine trigger for me. I absolutely can't stand that. Or roasted nuts, something like that. I cannot have that. This is especially, yeah, it could be aggravated by having some deficiencies. Then, poor sleep. We see that 50% of people, almost 50% of people, start experiencing poor sleep towards the end stage veganism here. And that was steadily growing throughout veganism. And then we see that it did not get resolved for some people, or it was new people who started experiencing that after quitting veganism. And then brain fog, we see that over 60% of participants experienced brain fog as a consequence of eating after some time of eating as end stage vegans. So this is interesting. The most important data points for me still are craving snacks and having energy drop. So this is something that I'm focusing the most personally because that directly tells us about the quality of the diet and that it is definitely missing something. Because craving snacks is not normal. In my universe, in my understanding of the world, in my experience talking to people, it is not normal to be craving snacks all the time. It's if there is nothing mental going on, like some mental pattern of you just trying to eat your anxiety away type of thing, or some like weird attachments and stuff like that, something that you can sort out with a psychologist. The biochemical reasons that lead to you craving snacks are pretty serious and you should not dismiss them because they can lead to they if you let them progress, they can lead to much stronger damage usually to the body. So craving snacks, yeah, I would be very serious considering this as a symptom of something big and big underlying and slowly progressing without you knowing. And then the energy drop, of course, as well. So food digestion is an energy heavy process, but it also can tell you that you are not balancing your energy properly. So you're not managing energy well. And this is also something to pay attention to. These two things. Here we conclude this chapter and we're moving on to diet and lifestyle relationship.